When seeking the spiritual path, many times we carry a secret expectation. We want liberation on our own terms. One of my main teachers told me once that it seemed like many people want to attain awakening, but are not willing to let go of themselves. It is like we want to become the awakened version of ourselves. How do we resolve this tension and move beyond it into the path of liberation? So, in all the teachings, it clearly says that the purpose of the teachings is awakening. And that means realization of our real nature, the primordial state. In the teachings, it says awakening is the cessation of ignorance and suffering and the realization of the ground of reality. But when we say we seek awakening, what are we actually willing to surrender? What parts of ourselves are still secretly trying to gain something from this path? So when some teachings say that awakening is the end of suffering, or when saying that is the realization of our real nature, this is not a contradiction. The ending of ignorance is really at the root, because suffering arises due to the fundamental ignorance. This fundamental ignorance, it's the veiling of our real nature, the not knowing our real nature, which is the Buddha nature, the luminous ground of reality. So the dualistic vision that does not recognize the primordial state, this is the ignorance. The end of ignorance is the ending of all the disturbing emotions and suffering, and is also the seeing of our real nature. When we speak of ignorance, it's not about not knowing some facts or information. It's not knowing about our real condition. In the Dzogchen teachings, ignorance is in relation to our own mind, our own condition, and is described in three aspects. Ignorance that is of the same nature as awareness, co-emergent ignorance, and objectifying ignorance. In very simple terms, the innate, pristine awareness of the ground of reality appears to veil itself, where awareness does not clearly know its own nature. That which is not knowing is itself the knowingness. So it's called ignorance that has the same nature as awareness. It is sort of a very subtle bewilderment at the level of basic awareness. Okay, but the ground of reality is not just emptiness. It is also infinite potential. And from this infinite potential, which we can also call the natural liveliness of the ground, the natural energy of manifestation that arises as movement within the ground. This movement of energy of the ground arises together with the knowing power of awareness. But due to that ignorance, the natural knowing power of awareness does not recognize that this movement is itself the movement of awareness. From that point, this pristine awareness becomes a subject, and the natural displays of the ground become an object or objects. This is a very simple explanation of the three manifestations of ignorance from the Dzogchen Atiyoga teachings. So this is what we mean by ignorance. Not knowing our real nature. Not knowing that whatever arises in our experience is the same nature of the ground. Let me use a simple classical example. The waves arising in the ocean are essentially the ocean itself moving. But if the cognitive power of the wave does not recognize that, then it seems that the wave sees itself as something separate and distinct from the ocean. Or the ocean sees the waves as something different than itself. It's the same, you see. Whichever way we look at it. Okay, but here it's important to say that this ignorance, as it manifests in these three modes, it never affects the pure ground. The pure ground is ever pure and perfected. And also, our real nature is the same as the nature of reality. It is the primordial state, because it is the authentic condition of everything. In the sutra, where it describes the first teachings of the Buddha, there is a passage where the Buddha says to his very first students that he will teach them how to let go of all faults and be liberated within a stainless, clear mind into the realization of the cessation of all delusion. This really is the essence of what the Dharma is for. Sometimes I hear people from the Zen tradition, they say things like, the Dharma is good for nothing. I like that very much. It's true. The Dharma is good for nothing. That is because what we usually consider good for something always means what is good for me. What can I get from this? What personal benefit? Or what benefit is there for my family or society? This is a kind of spiritual materialism. But if we look at the Dharma in that way, as a way to achieve some worldly benefit, then it is just making self-grasping stronger. And it's only making that ignorance stronger. because this self that is trying to get some benefit is really just a manifestation of that objectifying ignorance that I mentioned earlier. As I said at the start, one of my main teachers told me once directly that when meeting people all over the world, it seemed like many people want to attain awakening, but are not willing to let go of themselves. They want themselves, but awakened, like a super self. The Dharma is about letting go of ourselves. So, in relation to worldly goals, the Dharma is good for nothing. Letting go of ourselves here does not mean that we neglect ourselves in the ordinary worldly sense, beyond our capacity. No. This means letting go of our self-grasping, letting go of our deluded idea about who we are, letting go of the attachment to being me, with all that entails. In relation to the most important thing in this life, which is the resolution of this issue of birth and death, happiness and suffering, the nature of what we are, then the Dharma is that nature itself. It is the path and the result. In the Dzogchen Atiyoga teachings, we explain the path in terms of three aspects: the view, the meditation, and the behavior or conduct. Later, in other videos, I will go deeper into these three and give more concrete explanations. But now, in just a very short way, so view, meditation, and conduct. The view means what is our perspective of reality. The meditation is how we practice to realize that reality. And the conduct is how we integrate the path in all the aspects of life. In the Atiyoga teachings, these three are one. What do I mean by these three are one? It means that we explain them as three at the start, but then later we understand that they are not separate. That is to say, the view, the meditation, and the behavior are inseparable. These three, they do seem different at the start, but then it becomes clear that they are not. They are not different because the perspective or the view of reality is the same as what we call meditation. If they were different, then the path would be something contrived, some created thing. Let's be more clear about this. So what is the meaning of the view? The view is intrinsic awareness. The natural, pristine, non-dual awareness. That is the view. The meditation is intrinsic awareness. That means, in simple terms, that the meditation is to recognize and to be in that state. Also, the behavior is intrinsic awareness. The actions are also intrinsic awareness, in the sense that during the path, the practitioner develops gradually the capacity to integrate all the actions of body, speech, and mind within that state of awareness. So we can understand that the most important is to recognize and have a clear and concrete knowledge of what we call the view. As I just said, the view is not a philosophical view. The view is the direct experience of our primordial condition, which is also called the natural state, or natural presence, non-dual awareness. We can use many names, but this is our actual condition. To clearly come to have a direct experiential knowing of that is what we call the view in Dzogchen. Okay, so even though during the path these three seem to manifest or appear with some different aspects, but as I said, in reality they are the same. So at the start, we try to recognize our nature, this natural state. Usually in Dzogchen, we need some pointing out instruction. Otherwise, it's difficult. It's difficult to really recognize it because there are many subtle aspects of mindfulness or mental clarity that can be confused to be this pristine awareness. So it's important to really develop a concrete, direct knowledge. But at the start, if we are not sure, just trying to be in a state of clear presence, lucid, open and present, to remain like that. That is a good start. It is really good. In any case, then once we have some concrete experience and knowledge, we feel like we experience trying to meditate by remaining or abiding in that state. Then, as we develop a little more, we feel like we try to integrate our actions, like walking and eating, within that natural state of presence. So you see, at the start, all these three feel like different stages, and that is completely normal. But then gradually, we see that they are not different. And it's important to have this understanding from the start. That is what I meant earlier when I said that if it wasn't like this, then this would be a made-up path, a contrived teaching based on a cause and a result. But it's not like that. It seems there is a cause and a result, a practice and a result. But it's not really like that. So I'm talking about this because for this topic, what is the purpose of the Dharma? The purpose of the Dharma is to overcome our dualistic grasping at subject and object, and to wake up from the apparent reality of this dream into the primordial condition. In different systems of Dharma, they consider these aspects of the view, meditation, and conduct in slightly different ways. Some are more based on the idea of cause and effect, like I have to do certain actions to attain realization. While others are more based on this idea that we need to transform our experience, like transforming negative emotions and ignorance into wisdom. But in the end, all of that needs to be resolved in the natural state. In one of his texts, the Dzogchen master Longchenpa compares this idea of finding a sky behind the sky. He writes that to think that the natural condition can be attained by some causes, purification or transforming something, would be like thinking that by clearing away the sky, there is another sky to be found behind it. So the point here is that our natural state is ever present each moment. If we recognize that, which is like the sky, then what other sky are we looking for? This is the purpose of the Dharma, to discover our nature. The great Dzogchen yogi Shabkar also wrote that all the Buddhas of the three times, without exception, give teachings in vast amounts, yet they are all for the one purpose of realizing one's own mind. He also said that the Buddhas do not give teachings for any purpose other than that. This is a very clear statement. All the teachings of all the awakened beings are for one single purpose: to discover the nature of our being, of our mind. That is it. Let's consider something else. When we look at the vast amount of methods and presentations within the Buddhist traditions, there seems to be so much variety. There is so much variety. That variety brings some way to relate to the path for different people. But what happens is that sometimes people get a little too focused on the outer shell and start to develop very much the constructed form around the main core. So much that sometimes we forget really what the main point is. This happens over centuries or over decades sometimes. The thing is, we like the idea of a path that fits our spiritual identity, into our spiritual persona. The path becomes some kind of ornament of ourselves. I think sometimes we like the idea of being spiritual Dharma practitioners more than the actual day-to-day study and practice. You see, the letting go of ourselves. That is the hard part. It is hard, there's no doubt, but it is also the heart of the Dharma. The problem is, when a Dharma form becomes something that is constructing a new identity or a new worldview, something new that we can become and belong to, then the Dharma is no longer the Buddha Dharma. The teachings serve only the purpose to point to our real nature and to support our journey of discovery, of revelation of the Buddha nature. They are not meant to construct some new identity or new world system. So for that reason, I speak and teach and repeat a lot about the natural path. It is natural because it's not a construction. It doesn't require constructing anything. It is natural because the view or perspective of reality is in itself the natural awareness that is ever present non-dual, beyond subject and object. It is not constructed. It is the same natural, open presence, which is ever-flowing. It is natural because it doesn't require any constructed ways of doing things. The actions arise as the expression of the natural presence. It is natural because it is knowing ourselves, letting go of ourselves and revealing the Buddha nature, which is ever shining as the nature of reality. The Buddha Dharma is only for the purpose of waking up from delusion, to see our real nature. In that sense, in the case of the Dzogchen tradition, we can say that Dzogchen, which means the great perfection, is our real nature. That's what it means. It's our real nature. The teaching itself is a relative means to discover this primordial condition. If our Dharma path is leading us to see that the duality of self and object is an illusion and to realize the natural condition, then it is helpful. The Buddha taught based on the Four Noble Truths. So, seeing the truth of the nature of existence, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of cessation, and the truth of the path. This all comes together into a single point in Dzogchen. Not knowing our nature is the root of samsara and suffering. Knowing our real nature is the path, and it's the cessation. This is the natural and direct path. I hope this helps.